Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Bayer, and I'm podcasting from Aladumim in Israel. We human beings have a remarkable ability to hide our feelings. Everyone knows this from the time they reach a certain age of emotional maturity. It's pretty early on for most of us, probably somewhere around the age of 3. We learn rather quickly to master the art of disguising our emotions in front of others. At first, our parents and other family members, and then expanding our skill to friends and acquaintances. It's a finely honed skill, as we all know, serving us great benefits when we find it necessary to conceal our emotional state from those who shouldn't know what we are going through. Perhaps it doesn't work all the time, but we believe that it does, and that is what counts. The problem with this uniquely human ability is that other people can do it to us just as we can do it to them. We learn this also at a fairly early age, though not quite as early as we learn the skill ourselves. It is a process of discovery, similar to learning math or learning to play an instrument. We slowly recognize that this other person is trying to emotionally pull one over on us. We may resent it or attempt to force them to show their emotional hand or ignore it altogether. We are frequently totally oblivious that this is going on. That other person looks to be perfectly normal on an emotional level, but underneath they are seething with inner feelings, and we simply haven't a clue. Why do we do this? First, it is a learned trait from an early age, so it just becomes a part of the personality. It is frequently more reflexive than deliberate, like some instinctive impulse such as fight or flight. But when it's done with conscious intent, as a choice of the mind, the motivation can sometimes be surprising. We may have something to gain by not letting those other people in on the turmoil going on inside of us. We may secretly want them to find it out, but wish for them to be the ones to show the empathy and concern to force us to show our true colors. We may have feelings of inadequacy or fear if those emotions are revealed. We are human beings, and the last thing we may want is for another human being to know that we are really human. But there are times, and they are not necessarily rare, when we ourselves are not aware of our own emotions. We have hidden those feelings not only from others, but from ourselves. A good deal of modern psychology deals with this very state of mind. The process of discovering those hidden emotions can be extremely revealing and even life-changing. There is nothing quite like coming to terms with some latent feeling that was lying dormant in there for ages, clogging up the emotional channels and leaving us helpless to deal with stuff that we should have had no problem with. Usually these sorts of things tend to get revealed by speaking with other people. Occasionally we are able to uncover them on our own, but this is a rare skill. Everyone has to manage these emotional challenges at various times of their life, and it is the fortunate ones who have learned to master them, keeping some in check and finding a way to let others surface when it becomes unhealthy to keep them bottled up. A truly blessed person is someone who has another person to serve as their emotional sounding board, who can help them channel what is revealed and to reveal what needs to be uncovered. But it is not easy to find such a person, and many people go their entire lives without this blessing. There is, for certain people, an alternative to a human being playing this part. There is also God. Remarkable as it may sound to some, and obvious as it may be to others, God is there to help us sort out our emotional hang-ups. This is one of the primary roles God can play in our lives. Regardless of what we believe God to be, God is there deep within the recesses of the conscious mind and the conscience, waiting for us to ask for this friendly help. This is the most personal role of God, and it works like oil on a squeaky motor when the chips are down. This week's Parsha is called Pinchas. That is another name of a person. In this case, it was somebody who really only came to be known at the end of last week's Parsha. There was a major incident in which the Moabites, near whose land the Israelites were passing, used their women to seduce the Israelite men into some sort of idolatrous worship. The idea was to throw the Israelites off their invincible power they had with the backing of HaShem. To some degree, this plan worked, and some sort of plague struck the Israelites. In the middle of all that, an aristocratic Moabite woman approached the center of the encampment with an Israelite man. The impression one gets is that they were involved in some sort of sexual act. The leaders, including Moshe, were too paralyzed to do anything about this outrageous act happening right in front of them. Reaching for the moment that this Pinchas, who was a grandson of Aaron but not officially a Kohen, took a spear and stabbed them both in what was probably the groin. They died on the spot and the plague ended. With this drama, this week's Parsha begins. Pinhas is rewarded for his timely actions by HaShem with what is called a covenant of peace. While it isn't entirely clear what this really means, one of the implications of it was that he had earned the status of becoming a Kohen, which would remain within his line forever. He became the classic zealot, the warrior who rose to the moment and did what nobody else was willing or able to do. A good deal of the rest of the Parsha deals with the second census of the Israelite tribes and families. The totals of the members of the individual tribes are considerably different from what they were in the earlier census at the beginning of the book, which was 39 years prior to this. But the total number of Israelites is uncannily similar to that earlier total. This number, around 600,000, is one of the traditional fixed numbers of Judaism and has remained both an anchor of solidity and a great mystery throughout the millennia. How could this number stay almost the same if the totals of the individual tribes were so different? The rest of the Parsha deals with a couple of short subjects and one long list of offerings to be brought on various special occasions. This list covers all the major holidays and the regular offerings. Among the shorter subjects are the first details about how the land of Canaan is to be divided up among the tribes and families. It was to be done by some sort of lottery system. In the course of all this, a group of women, all daughters of a certain man named Salafad, approached Moshe with a complaint. They were the only children of their father, and the system of inheriting land within a family would leave them and their father's landed possession without an heir, since only males could inherit. When this is hashed out through communication with HaShem, it is determined that in such a situation, females inherit the land of their father. The other short subject is HaShem telling Moshe that he will die and that he is to ascend a certain mountain to the east of Canaan and view the entire land. He will die on that mountain and never be able to enter the land, as he had already been told. This was all due to the way he and Aaron handled a certain situation shortly before concerning a lack of water. They displayed uncharacteristic anger in dealing with the grumbling Israelites, and were told by HaShem that they had forsaken an opportunity to sanctify HaShem and instead left things with emotions boiling over. Their punishment was that they would not be able to fulfill their mission of bringing the Israelites into the promised land. This harsh fate of Moshe is repeated a few times in later chapters of the Torah, including the very last chapter of Deuteronomy. There, this whole thing of him ascending this mountain and viewing the land actually happens. What is particularly interesting about all this is that right after he is told this in this week's Parsha, he immediately requests from HaShem that a new leader be found for the Israelites. Moshe recognizes very clearly that he will not be the one to complete his task, and that HaShem should choose another leader. This selfless act, after hearing this harsh decree repeated to him, is recognized as one of the great traits of a true leader. They have to know when it is time to find somebody to replace themselves. However, there is a little twist to all of this. Towards the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy, there is a section in which Moshe begs HaShem to allow him to enter the land. He doesn't want to merely see it from afar, but to actually walk on its surface and be there, like he had dreamed for much of his life. Hashem's response to all of this was somewhat surprising. Hashem told Moshe to stop with this begging and to cease from making this request. He would not be able to enter the land since the divine decree was final. There is a question that could be asked on all of this. Assuming these two accounts match and they are describing the same series of events, why wasn't any of this begging mentioned in this week's Parsha? Why did it go straight to Moshe's request that Hashem appoint a new leader? It is true that we really cannot determine exactly when Moshe begged Hashem for a reprieve from the decree, and maybe it took place sometime later. But why weren't those feelings of Moshe reflected in some way when he heard the decree imposed upon him at this moment? The answer, perhaps, is that the emotions connected with him wanting to enter the land hadn't really surfaced within him. He had them, but he was unaware of them. His conscious mind only allowed him to deal with the needs of the moment, and those were solely concerned with appointing a leader who would take his place. In other words, he submerged his personal feelings for the needs of the community, but they had to come out at some point. They did at that point towards the beginning of Deuteronomy. Why did they come out then? We don't know, but it happens that it came at a time when he was supplicating Hashem. It was at a moment such as that, when all the guards were down, that Moshe's latent feelings about entering the land emerged to the surface. It was because he was in a state of communication with Hashem that his feelings were revealed. Perhaps he didn't know that they were there, but they were. God can be our shrink when we really need someone and there is no one there. These feelings had to come out, and they did. Sometimes it is God who enables us to find our inner feelings, and sometimes it is God who tells us that enough is enough. Shabbat Shalom.